If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is James O'Connor and I've been a ranger at the Boundary Waters for 15 years now. Most folks call me Jim, and at 45 I've seen pretty much everything these woods can throw at a person. Well, at least that's what I thought until that winter of '77. I guess I should tell you that before becoming a ranger, I served in Vietnam with the Marine Force Recon. Those years taught me how to survive in the worst conditions imaginable, but sometimes I wonder if all that training was enough for what I encountered in those frozen woods. Every morning, I look at my hands, specifically at the 3 missing fingers on my left hand, and remember, the doctors called it frostbite, but I know better. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, hearing those screams echo through my head. It all started on January 12, 1977. I remember the date clearly because it was one of the coldest winters Minnesota had ever seen. The temperature gauge at my ranger station read -45 degrees that morning. Looking out my cabin window, all I could see was white. The snow was coming down so hard it was like someone had hung a white sheet in front of my eyes. That's when the radio crackled to life. 3 hikers were missing in Sector 7, the most remote part of our area. My boss's voice was tense. "Jim, I know it's bad out there, but you're the only one who knows that sector well enough to go in these conditions." I didn't hesitate. Maybe I should have. But you see, 15 years ago, I lost my younger brother Tommy to hypothermia in weather just like this. I couldn't save him then, but maybe I could save these hikers now. As I packed my gear, I had no idea I was about to face something that would make my worst days in Vietnam look like a walk in the park. Something that our ancestors had warned us about for centuries, something that lurked in the coldest, darkest parts of these ancient woods. This is my story, a story about survival, about fear, and about a hunger that goes beyond anything human. Some might not believe what I'm about to tell you, but every word is true. I have the scars and the nightmares to prove it. I loaded up my snowmobile with everything I'd need: extra fuel, emergency flares, first aid supplies, enough food for 5 days, and my trusty rifle. The weather radio warned of the worst storm in decades heading our way, but I couldn't wait. Those hikers wouldn't survive another night out there alone. As I drove deeper into the woods, the trees became thicker, their branches heavy with ice and snow. The wind howled like a wounded animal, and my headlight barely cut through the swirling snow. I kept thinking about those hikers, probably huddled somewhere, hoping someone would find them. After 3 hours of careful driving, I reached Sector 7. That's when I noticed something odd. The wildlife to there wasn't any. Usually you'd see tracks of moose, deer, or at least rabbits, but the snow was eerily smooth, except for one set of tracks that made my blood run cold. They were huge, bigger than any moose tracks I'd ever seen, and they were fresh. I've tracked animals all my life, but these were different. They looked almost human, but each print was at least 2 feet long. I pulled out my radio to report back to base, but all I got was static. The storm must have been interfering with the signal. As I put the radio away, I heard it, a scream that didn't sound quite human, echoing through the valley. My military training kicked in. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight, marking my snowmobile's location with bright orange tape. The screaming had come from the east, where the old mining trails wound through the hills. As I walked, I noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols carved deep into the bark. They looked old, but somehow the snow hadn't settled in them. I'd worked these woods for years, but had never seen anything like them. The temperature was dropping fast. My thermometer now showed -50. That's when I found the first sign of the hikers, a torn backpack hanging from a tree branch. But what scared me wasn't the backpack. It was how high up it was, at least 12 feet off the ground. No animal I knew could have put it there. And the way it was torn, it wasn't by claws or teeth. It looked like it had been ripped apart by human hands. Night was coming, and out here, darkness meant death. I needed to find shelter soon, but as the sun began to set, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from between the trees, something that didn't want me to leave these woods alive. I found a small cave just as darkness was setting in. After checking it was safe and empty, I set up my emergency camp. The wind outside was getting stronger, howling through the trees like a freight train. I kept my flashlight close and tried to warm my hands near the small camping stove. That's when I heard it, footsteps crunching in the snow outside. Heavy footsteps. I grabbed my rifle and pointed my flashlight toward the cave entrance. The beam caught something that made my heart stop. A person, standing perfectly still in the blizzard. "Hello?" I called out. "I'm Ranger O'Connor. Are you one of the missing hikers?" No answer. Just that figure, standing there. As I stepped closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. The person wasn't moving, not even shivering in the deadly cold. I got within 10 feet and saw why. It was John Martinez, one of the missing hikers, frozen solid but standing straight up like a statue. This wasn't natural. In all my years as a ranger, I'd never seen a frozen body standing up. They always fell down. Always. But John was there, eyes wide open, frost covering his face, and on his neck, strange marks, like someone had drawn symbols with their fingers. I needed to document this for the investigation, but when I reached for my camera, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold it. That's when I noticed something else. The temperature around John's body was even colder than the air around us. My thermometer read 60 below zero, in a small circle around him. As I backed away, I heard whispers on the wind. At first I thought it was just the storm, but then I made out words. "So hungry." The voice sounded like John's, but that was impossible. I looked at his frozen body again, and for a split second, I swear this is true, his eyes moved to look right at me. I ran back into the cave, my heart pounding. This wasn't hypothermia playing tricks on my mind. This was something else, something worse. I remembered the old Native American stories my grandfather used to tell me about these woods, stories I'd always dismissed as legends. But sitting there in that cave, listening to the wind that now sounded like human screams, I started to believe those legends might be real. And if they were, I knew what we were dealing with. The Wendigo, a spirit of winter and hunger that was never satisfied. I checked my watch, only 3 hours until dawn, but something told me this was going to be the longest night of my life, and somewhere out in that storm, 2 more hikers needed my help. If they were still alive, I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. The crack of frozen branches, the howling wind, and worst of all those whispers that kept getting closer. Around midnight, something strange started happening to me. I felt hungry, not normal hungry, but a deep, burning hunger I'd never felt before. I had plenty of food in my pack, but after eating 2 energy bars and some beef jerky, the hunger just got worse. It felt like my stomach was trying to eat itself. That's when I remembered another part of the Wendigo legend. It makes its victims feel starving, no matter how much they eat. At 2 a.m., my flashlight caught movement outside the cave. Something tall was moving between the trees, much taller than any person should be. I grabbed my rifle, trying to keep my hands steady. The beam of light showed glimpses of a skeletal figure, its skin pulled tight over long, twisted bones. It had to be at least 15 feet tall. "Help, please help me," a woman's voice called out, probably Sarah Chen, another one of the missing hikers, but the voice was coming from the direction of that tall figure. I knew it wasn't really her. The thing out there was trying to trick me. I stayed quiet, pressing myself against the cave wall. The creature moved closer. I could smell it now, like rotting meat and frozen earth. It stopped right at the cave entrance, and I saw its face. I'll never forget that face. Human-like, but wrong, with black eyes as deep as wells and teeth that were too long, too sharp. It smiled at me. My training told me to shoot, But something deeper told me bullets wouldn't help. The creature reached into the cave with its long bony arm. Its fingers were like icicles stretching toward me. The cave temperature dropped so low my breath turned to ice crystals before it left my mouth. That's when I remembered the flare gun in my pocket. I didn't think, I just acted. I pulled it out and fired straight at the thing's face. The red light lit up the cave like daylight, and the creature screamed, a sound like breaking ice and howling wind mixed together. It disappeared into the storm, but I knew it wasn't gone. It was just waiting, playing with me, like a cat with a mouse. Dawn was still hours away, and I had a terrible feeling that finding John's frozen body was just the beginning. The real horror was still to come. When the first light of dawn finally came, I was shaking not just from the cold but from what I'd seen. That hunger was still there gnawing at my insides. I had to keep moving. I needed to find the other two hikers before whatever got John got them too. I packed up my gear and stepped out of the cave. The storm had died down a bit, but the air felt wrong, heavy and thick, like breathing through ice. That's when I saw them, footprints in the snow, leading away from the cave. They started as those huge tracks I'd seen before but slowly changed into normal human footprints. They had to be Sarah Chen's. Following the tracks, I came across a second campsite. A torn tent flapped in the wind, and supplies were scattered everywhere, but something was odd. While the food was untouched. If someone was starving out here, why didn't they eat anything? I found Sarah's diary near her sleeping bag. The last entry made my skin crawl. It read, "So hungry, can't stop eating, but nothing helps. Tom keeps saying he sees something tall following us. I'm starting to see it too. It whispers to me at night, says it can make the hunger stop if I just..." The entry stopped there. Suddenly, I heard branches breaking behind me. I spun around, rifle ready. Through the trees, I saw a figure running, but not like a normal person. It moved too fast, almost like it was gliding over the snow. "Sarah," I called out. "Sarah Chen." The figure stopped. It turned slowly, and I saw it was Tom Miller, the third hiker, but something was very wrong. His eyes were completely black, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth, like the creature I'd seen last night. He smiled at me, the same horrible smile as the Wendigo, and spoke in a voice that wasn't human anymore. "Ranger Jim, so hungry. Aren't you hungry too?" I raised my rifle, but Tom moved like lightning. In a second he was right in front of me, his breath smelling like frozen meat. I could see now what was happening. The Wendigo hadn't just killed Tom, it was turning him into one of its own. I had to make a choice, and I had to make it fast. I fired my rifle, but Tom, or whatever he was becoming, moved too fast. He knocked the gun from my hands and sent me flying into a tree. The impact knocked the wind out of me. As I struggled to breathe, I heard Sarah screaming somewhere in the woods. That's when I remembered something my grandfather once told me about the Wendigo. "Fire," he'd said. "They fear fire more than anything." I had matches and my camping stove fuel in my backpack. If I could just reach it. Tom was coming at me again, his body twitching in weird ways, like his bones were trying to grow longer. I rolled away just as his clawed hand slashed the tree where my head had been. The bark froze solid where he touched it. "Join us, Ranger," he growled, his voice a mixture of human and something else. "The hunger, it goes away when you give in." I scrambled through the snow, grabbed my pack, and pulled out the fuel canister. Tom lunged at me, but this time I was ready. I sprayed the fuel in an arc between us and lit it with my emergency matches. A wall of fire burst up, and Tom screamed, that same awful scream I'd heard in the night. He backed away from the flames, his body twisting and changing. That's when I saw Sarah. She was hanging from a tree branch 30 feet up, her body starting to freeze just like John's, but she was still alive, her eyes moving, silently begging for help. The real Wendigo appeared behind Tom. its massive form towering over the trees. It put its long, bony hands on Tom's shoulders, and I watched in horror as Tom's body began to stretch and grow. I had to make a choice, try to save Sarah, or run, but running would mean leaving her to become one of them. I couldn't let that happen, not after losing my brother to these woods. Not again. I grabbed my flare gun, took a deep breath, and did something either really brave or really stupid. I shot my last flare straight at the branch holding Sarah. As it broke, I ran forward and caught her just before she hit the ground. She was cold, so cold, but still breathing. The Wendigo roared, and Tom lunged at us through the flames. I half carried, half dragged Sarah toward an old mine shaft I'd spotted earlier. It was our only chance. Behind us, I could hear them coming, their footsteps shaking the ground. The hunger in my stomach was getting worse, and I could feel Sarah starting to twitch in my arms. "Don't listen to the whispers," I told her. "Whatever happens, don't listen." We made it to the mine entrance just as Tom caught up to us. He wasn't even looking human anymore. His arms had grown too long. His face stretched into something horrible. The real Wendigo was right behind him, its black eyes fixed on us. Inside the mine shaft, I saw something that gave me hope. Old Native American drawings on the walls. They showed the Wendigo, but also showed how to fight it. There were symbols, the same ones I'd seen carved in the trees. Sarah's skin was turning grey, her teeth starting to sharpen. She grabbed my arm, crying, "Help me please, I'm so hungry." The Wendigo and Tom blocked the entrance. We were trapped. But looking at those cave paintings, I realized what I had to do. My grandfather had taught me about blood offerings, how they could bind evil spirits. "Sarah, hold on," I whispered. "Just hold on a little longer." I pulled out my knife and did something I never thought I'd do. With shaking hands, I cut my palm and started drawing the symbols from the cave walls with my own blood. The Wendigo screamed, not in anger this time, but in fear. It knew what I was doing. "Ancient spirits," I said the words my grandfather had taught me. "I offer my blood freely to bind this evil." The mine shaft got colder than ever. Sarah was shaking violently now, her eyes turning black. Tom rushed at us, but hit some kind of invisible wall where I'd drawn the symbols. The Wendigo tried to reach us too, but couldn't cross the bloodline. But something was wrong. The symbols were freezing over too fast. I needed more blood. Without thinking, I grabbed my knife again. That's when the Wendigo's long arm shot forward, catching my left hand. 3 of my fingers turned black with frost instantly. The pain was horrible, but I managed to complete the circle with my blood. The mine shaft filled with a bright blue light. Sarah screamed, human scream this time, as something dark poured out of her mouth. Tom's body began to shrink back to normal, but I could tell he was already gone. The Wendigo thrashed and howled as the symbols on the wall began to glow. Its body started getting pulled into the rock wall like it was being sucked into a vacuum. The sound it made, I still hear it in my nightmares. Then everything went quiet. Sarah was unconscious but breathing normally. Tom's body lay still on the ground, human again but lifeless. My left hand was burning with pain where my fingers had frozen. I heard voices calling from outside. The rescue team had finally made it through the storm, but they wouldn't believe what really happened. Nobody ever does. That was 3 years ago. My missing fingers are my proof that it wasn't just a dream or hallucination. Sometimes on cold nights I can feel them again, aching with ghost pain. And sometimes I still hear whispers in the wind calling me back to those woods. The hunger never fully went away. It's quiet now, but it's still there. And I know the Wendigo isn't gone, just trapped, waiting. Every winter, I check the weather reports from Boundary Waters. When I hear about missing hikers up there, I wonder. But that's a story for another day. The rescue team found us at dawn. They had lots of questions, but I couldn't tell them the truth. Who'd believe a story about a 15-foot monster that turns people into ice? I told them we got caught in the storm, and that's all. Sarah made it, but she was never the same. Like me, she couldn't eat meat anymore. Even the smell of it made her sick. She moved to Arizona after that. I guess she never wanted to see snow again. The official report said Tom and John died from the cold. The strange marks on their bodies. They blamed it on animal attacks. The weird symbols in the mine. Old graffiti, they said. It's funny how people explain away things they don't want to believe. I quit my ranger job a month later. Couldn't handle the cold anymore. Now I work at a park in New Mexico where it's warm and dry. But some things followed me here. Every winter, I have the same dream. I'm back in those woods and I hear that voice calling me. The hunger comes back too, just a little. And sometimes when I look in the mirror first thing in the morning, my eyes look different, darker, hungrier. I keep a box under my bed with things from that day. Sarah's diary, my frozen camera, and a piece of bark with those strange symbols. Sometimes the symbols glow at night, especially when it's cold. Last week I got a letter from Sarah. She wrote that she's been having dreams too, and she heard from another ranger up in Minnesota about more hikers going missing in those same woods. The Wendigo is still there, I know it. The binding spell won't hold forever. Sometimes I wonder if I should go back, try to end it for good. But then I look at my missing fingers, feel that old hunger stir, and I remember what my grandfather told me. Some evil things can't be killed, Jim. They can only be contained, and they're patient, so very patient. So I stay here in the desert, where the sun burns hot and bright. But every time I hear about missing hikers in snowy woods, I wonder, is it happening again? And that's my story. Most people don't believe it, and maybe that's for the best. But if you're ever hiking in the northern woods in winter, and you feel a hunger that won't go away, or hear voices in the wind calling your name, run as fast as you can, because the Wendigo is always hungry, and it never forgets a meal it didn't finish. My name is Marcus Rodriguez, and I've been a ranger at Red Rock Canyon for the past 15 years. The red sandstone cliffs have been my home, my sanctuary, and lately, they've become something else, a place of nightmares. I still remember that scorching morning in August 1983, when everything changed. The sun hadn't even risen, but the air was already thick and heavy, like breathing through a hot blanket. The weather folks were calling it the worst heat wave in Nevada's history, with temperatures climbing up to 115 degrees. As I got ready in my small ranger station cabin, my eyes drifted to Sarah's photo on the bedside table. My wife's smile still brightened the room, even though she'd been gone for a year now. Cancer took her too soon, but the mountains she loved kept me going. I touched the silver amulet around my neck, a family heirloom passed down through generations of my Paiute ancestors. Sarah always said it made me look mysterious. The radio crackled to life, just as I was pouring my morning coffee. Ranger Rodriguez, it was Bill Thompson, one of the local ranchers. His voice sounded shaky, different from his usual confident drawl. You need to see this. Found one of my cattle. It's not right. I've dealt with mountain lion attacks before, even the occasional bear, but something in Bill's voice made my skin crawl. Grabbing my gear and hat, I headed out to my patrol truck. The morning air was already shimmering with heat as I drove down the dusty road to Bill's ranch. What I found there would be just the beginning of the strangest and scariest summer of my life. I didn't know it then, but those red cliffs held secrets older than the rocks themselves, and some secrets, I would learn, are better left buried in the desert sand. Little did I know, my training as a search and rescue specialist, my climbing skills, and even my Native American heritage would all be tested in ways I never imagined, because something was awakening in Red Rock Canyon, something that howled at dawn and left tracks no known animal could make. This is my story, a story about survival, about ancient legends coming to life, and about learning that sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones that hide in the dark. They're the ones that hunt in broad daylight. When I reached Bill's ranch, I could tell something was wrong. His usual friendly dogs were hiding under the porch, whimpering. Bill stood by his fence, his face pale and sweaty, and not just from the heat. Over there, he pointed to a spot behind his barn. I've never seen anything like it, Marcus. Walking over, I saw what had scared him so badly. One of his cows lay on the ground, but this wasn't any normal animal attack. The cow had been torn apart in a way that made no sense. What caught my eye were the tracks around it. 3-toed prints bigger than my hand. They weren't from any animal I knew, and I knew every creature in these parts. What do you think did this? Bill asked, his voice barely a whisper. I'm not sure. I answered honestly, taking photos with my camera, but I've been getting strange reports all week. 3 rock climbers have gone missing from the canyon. That's when we heard it, a howl that made us both freeze. It wasn't a coyote or a wolf. This sound was different, deeper, and it came from somewhere up in the red cliffs. The strange thing was, it was broad daylight. Most predators don't howl during the day. My amulet felt warm against my chest, something that hadn't happened before. I remembered my grandfather's words about it being more than just jewelry, about how it would warn me of danger. I'd always thought those were just stories to entertain kids, but now, Bill, lock up your animals tonight. Keep your family inside. I'm going to check out those cliffs. Back in my truck, I radioed the station to report what I'd found, but as I drove toward the canyon, something caught my eye in my rearview mirror. For just a second, I thought I saw a large shape moving between the rocks. When I stopped to look, it was gone. The heat was getting worse, making the air shimmer like water, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something that shouldn't exist, something that was hunting in my canyon. I parked near the base of the climbing trails where the last group had disappeared. Their car was still there, covered in dust. As I got out, I noticed more of those strange 3-toed tracks in the dirt. They led toward a cave opening I'd never noticed before, even though I'd been past this spot hundreds of times. My radio crackled with static, making me jump. Through the noise, I could barely make out words. Marcus, be careful, they're not what you think. The voice faded into static, and my amulet grew warmer still. Standing there in the scorching heat, I had to make a choice, follow those tracks into the cave, or wait for backup. But something told me waiting wasn't an option. Whatever was happening in Red Rock Canyon needed to be stopped, and somehow, I knew I was the only one who could do it. I took my flashlight and emergency pack from the truck. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. The cool air inside was a relief from the desert heat, but something felt wrong, really wrong. My flashlight beam showed more of those strange tracks in the dust. They were fresh. Whoever might them had been here recently. The beam also caught something that made my heart skip: a torn climbing rope and a broken helmet. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing through the cave. "This is Ranger Rodriguez. Is anyone here?" Only silence answered, but then I heard something dripping. Following the sound, I found a small pool of water. Next to it was a backpack, one that belonged to the missing climbers. It was torn, with dark stains that looked too much like blood. That's when I saw the drawings on the cave wall. Ancient petroglyphs, the kind my grandfather used to show me. But these were different. They showed tall, wolf-like creatures walking on 2 legs. Some were hunting. Others seemed to be changing from human to beast. My flashlight beam made the red paint look like fresh blood. Suddenly, my amulet turned hot, really hot. At the same time, my flashlight caught 2 yellow eyes reflecting in the darkness ahead. They were at least 7 feet off the ground. A low growl filled the cave, not like any animal I'd ever heard. It sounded almost human. I started backing away slowly, remembering my training, no sudden movements. But as I moved, more eyes appeared in the darkness. 3 pairs, no 5. I was surrounded. The first creature stepped into my flashlight beam. I wish I could say my eyes were playing tricks on me, but they weren't. It walked on two legs, covered in dark fur, with a wolf-like head and hands that looked too human. It carried something that made my blood run cold, a modern hunting knife. My radio burst to life with a scream of static, startling both me and the creatures. In that split second of confusion, I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, squeezing through passages, scraping my shoulders on rock walls. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind me, claws on stone and those terrible half-human howls. I barely made it back to the cave entrance. The bright sunlight seemed to make them hesitate just long enough. I scrambled into my truck, started the engine, and sped away. In my rearview mirror, I saw dark shapes at the cave mouth, watching me leave. Back at the ranger station, my hands were shaking as I wrote my report. How could I explain what I'd seen? Who would believe me? But I knew one thing. I needed help. It was time to visit the tribal elders. If anyone knew what these creatures were, it would be them. The sun was setting now, painting the red rocks with shadows that looked like claws. Somewhere out there those things were waiting, and somehow, I knew they weren't done with me yet. The drive to the Paiute reservation took an hour, but it felt like forever. Every shadow on the road made me jump. The sun was setting, turning the sky blood red, when I finally reached my grandfather's old friend Thomas Running Bear. Thomas was sitting on his porch, almost like he was expecting me. His weathered face turned serious when he saw my amulet glowing faintly in the dim light. "You've seen them, haven't you?" he asked before I could even speak. "The ones who hunt at dawn." I sat down next to him and told him everything. The cattle, the tracks, the cave, those wolf creatures. He listened quietly, nodding, as if he'd heard it all before. "Your grandfather feared this day would come," Thomas said, his voice low. "Every 20 years when the heat comes like fire they wake up. The last time was in 63. A ranger disappeared then too." "What are they?" I asked. "Our people called them the Shadow Walkers. They were once men, Spanish explorers who found something evil in those caves, something that changed them." He paused, looking at my amulet. "That's why your grandfather gave you this. He knew his grandson would need it someday." Thomas went inside and came back with an old leather bag, a medicine bag, decorated with symbols I remembered from the cave walls. "Inside are things you'll need. Sacred herbs, blessed stones, and your grandfather's journal." He wrote down everything he knew about them. Thomas handed me the bag. "But be careful, Marcus. They're smart. They use tools, they plan, and they remember. And now they know about you." Just then, a howl echoed across the desert, closer than I expected. Thomas grabbed my arm. "They're hunting you already," he said urgently. "Listen carefully. They're strongest at dawn and dusk. They can't be killed by normal weapons. Only the old ways can stop them. Your amulet will guide you, but you must figure out how." I heard another howl, even closer. Thomas pushed me toward my truck. "Go. Get back to your station before dark. Read the journal. And Marcus," he called as I started the engine, "don't let them bite you. Their curse spreads through blood." Driving back, I kept checking my mirrors. Shapes seemed to move alongside the road, keeping pace with my truck. My amulet stayed warm against my chest, pulsing like a heartbeat. The journal sat on the seat next to me, along with the medicine bag. Whatever these creatures were, whatever they wanted, I knew I had to stop them. But first I needed to understand what I was fighting. As I pulled into the ranger station, the last light faded from the sky. In the distance, multiple howls rose up at once. They were calling to each other, and somehow, I knew they were planning something. I locked every door and window in the station. Then, with my amulet glowing softly, I opened my grandfather's journal and began to read. My hands shook as I opened my grandfather's old leather journal. The pages were yellow and filled with his messy handwriting. As I read, my amulet kept getting warmer. The first pages told about the medicine bag Thomas had given me. Each item had a purpose: tobacco for protection, sage to drive away evil, cedar for healing, and sweet grass for prayers too. But what caught my eye was a story about the shadow walkers. They come when the heat rises. My grandfather had written, they hide in darkness, but can walk in daylight. They fear fire and bright light. They were once men who found something evil in the caves, something that changed them forever. I heard scratching sounds outside the station windows. Looking up, I saw shadows moving in the moonlight. They were testing the building, looking for a way in. My radio crackled again. Through the static I heard a voice, one of the missing climbers. "Help, we're in the deep cave. They're keeping us." The voice cut off. I checked my grandfather's journal again. There was a map drawn in shaky lines, showing cave systems I'd never known about. One cave was marked with a warning, the place of change where they sleep. The scratching got louder. I saw yellow eyes peering through the windows, but the creatures wouldn't come closer. That's when I noticed. They were staying away from the light of my desk lamp. My grandfather's last entry caught my attention. The curse spreads through blood, but the old medicines can stop it. The amulet will show the way. But remember faces. They plan, they think. They're not just animals, they're something worse. A loud howl made me jump. It sounded like it came from right outside my door, but this time I heard something else in it. Words, they were calling my name. Dawn was coming soon. I had to make a choice: stay hidden in the station, or try to save those climbers. The medicine bag felt heavy in my hands, and my amulet pulsed with warmth. I knew what I had to do, but first I needed a plan. I gathered everything I thought I'd need: flashlights, extra batteries, rope, my grandfather's medicine bag, and a flare gun. The journal said they feared fire, so I grabbed every match and lighter I could find. The scratching outside had stopped, but I knew they were still there, waiting, watching. I looked at my watch. 4:30 a.m. Dawn was coming in about an hour. According to the journal, that's when they'd be strongest. But I couldn't wait any longer. Those climbers needed help. My hands trembled as I drew a circle of tobacco around myself, just like the journal said. Then I tied the medicine bag to my belt and checked my amulet. It was glowing brighter now, like a tiny moon against my chest. "Okay, Marcus," I whispered to myself. "You can do this." I opened the door slowly. The night was eerily quiet. No crickets, no desert sounds, just silence. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, showing empty ground, but the air had smelled wrong, like wet dog and something rotten. The amulet pulled me toward the caves, getting warmer with each step. I followed my grandfather's map, moving as quietly as I could. Every few steps, I'd stop and listen. Sometimes I'd hear movement behind rocks, or catch glimpses of eyes in the darkness. They were following me. Halfway to the caves, I heard it, a human voice crying out in pain. It came from the direction my amulet was pulling me. But something felt wrong. Too easy. That's when I remembered my grandfather's warning. They're smart. They plan. I spun around just in time to see them. 3 huge shapes rushing at me from different directions. They moved like wolves but stood like men, their yellow eyes glowing in my flashlight beam. My heart pounding. I did the only thing I could think of. I fired the flare gun straight up. Red light exploded overhead, and the creatures backed away, howling in pain and anger. But I knew the light wouldn't last long, and somewhere in those caves, people needed my help. As the flare started to fade, I ran toward the cave entrance, hearing those terrible half-human howls behind me. The real hunt was about to begin. The cave felt different this time, colder, darker. My flashlight beam showed the way, but the shadows seemed to move on their own. Water dripped somewhere deep inside, each drop echoing like a tiny drum. I followed the map, trying to breathe quietly. The amulet was so hot now, it almost burned. Suddenly I heard voices ahead. Human voices. The missing climbers. Hello, a weak voice called out. Is someone there? I'm Ranger Rodriguez, I whispered back. I'm here to help. Following the voice, I found them. 3 climbers huddled in a small cave room. They looked terrible, dirty and scared, but alive. One of them, a young woman, had a bad cut on her arm. They kept us here, she said, shaking. They're not animals, Ranger. They talk to each other. They used our own ropes to tie us up. Just then my amulet pulsed hard. A deep growl came from behind us. Well, another brave ranger. The voice was rough, like rocks grinding together, but it was definitely human words. A figure stepped into my flashlight beam. It was huge, standing on 2 legs, covered in dark fur, but its eyes were human. You're the missing ranger from 63, I said, remembering the journal. James Cooper. The creature smiled, showing long teeth. Smart boy. Your grandfather couldn't save me then, and you can't save these people now. More creatures appeared, blocking the exit. I could hear the climbers whimpering behind me. My hand touched the medicine bag at my belt. The old ways won't help you, Cooper growled. We're stronger now, and soon you'll be one of us. I pulled out my grandfather's tobacco pouch. Cooper laughed, a horrible sound, half howl, half human. Your choice, Ranger, he said. Join us willingly, or we do this the hard way. Dawn was coming. I could feel it, and I had to make a decision that would change everything. My hands moved fast, doing what my grandfather's journal had taught me. I threw the sacred tobacco in a circle around us while holding my amulet tight. Cooper and his pack stepped back, snarling as an invisible wall seemed to form. Run, I shouted to the climbers. Follow the left tunnel. It leads outside. But Cooper just laughed again. The sun's rising, Ranger. Our strongest time. Your little magic circle won't last long. He was right. I could feel the tobacco barrier weakening. The amulet burned against my chest, and suddenly I understood what it was trying to tell me. You're not the only one who knows these caves, Cooper, I said, pulling out my last flare. My grandfather left me a message about the place of change. Cooper's yellow eyes widened. No, the cave where it all started, where you first changed. I held up the flare, the one filled with old gas pockets from the earth. The other creatures started backing away. They knew what I was thinking. You'll kill us all, Cooper growled. Maybe, I said, but these people are leaving. Now, I nodded to the climbers. They ran past the creatures, who were too focused on my flare to stop them. I heard their footsteps fade down the tunnel. Last chance, Cooper. Let us go, or we all burn. He looked human for a moment. Sad, tired, lost. Then the monster came back to his eyes. Take them, he ordered his pack. I struck the flare. The cave exploded with red light. The creatures howled and covered their eyes. I ran, following the climber's path. Behind me, I heard Cooper's angry roar turn to panic as the flare hit the ground. The explosion came just as I reached the others. The blast threw us forward, hot air rushing past. Rocks fell everywhere. We made it outside just as the sun rose. Behind us, the cave entrance collapsed in a cloud of dust. My amulet grew cold. The climbers were crying, hugging each other. They were safe, but I knew it wasn't over. In the distance, a single howl rose up, filled with pain and anger. Cooper had survived, and now he would never stop hunting me. I touched my amulet, feeling its power. Somehow, I knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. The next few days were a blur. The police came, took statements, and searched the caves. Of course they found nothing, just collapsed tunnels and strange tracks they couldn't explain. The climbers told their story, but who would believe tales of walking wolfmen? But I knew the truth. Every night, I heard them howling in the distance. They were regrouping, planning, and my amulet never stopped its warm warning. A week after the cave incident, I noticed the first change in myself. The bite mark Cooper had given me during our fight was healing too fast. I could smell things I shouldn't be able to smell, hear things too far away to hear. I rushed back to Thomas Running Bear. His face turned grim when he saw my arm. "The curse is in your blood now," he said quietly, "but your grandfather's amulet is fighting it. You're caught between two worlds, Marcus. What can I do? You must return to the caves every full moon. Perform the ritual your grandfather wrote about. It will keep the curse at bay." He touched my amulet. "But there's more. You're a guardian now. The shadow walkers will return. They always do, and you'll be ready." That night, standing on my porch at the ranger station, I heard Cooper's voice in the wind. "This isn't over, Ranger. We'll meet again." I touched my amulet and felt its power pulse through me. "I'll be waiting," I whispered back. The desert stretched out before me, its red rocks hiding ancient secrets. Somewhere out there, Cooper and his pack were watching, waiting. But I had a new purpose now. I was no longer just a ranger. I was a protector, a guardian of boundaries between our world and theirs. My grandfather knew this day would come. That's why he left me his journal, his medicine bag and his amulet. Now I understand why. Some say there are no real monsters in this world. They're wrong. I've seen them. I've fought them. And as I watch the sun set over Red Rock Canyon, I know one thing for sure. I'll fight them again, because the howls at dawn are getting closer. My name is Catherine Morrison, but everyone calls me Kate. I've spent the last 15 years of my life as a ranger here at Mount Baker, and I thought I knew every tree, every trail, and every shadow in these ancient woods. But what happened last November changed everything I believed about this forest, and about what's really out there in the mist. I should probably tell you that I'm not just any ranger. Before this, I was an Olympic biathlete. You know, those crazy folks who ski and shoot. That training has saved my life more times than I can count, especially during what I'm about to tell you. These days I'm 41, single and more comfortable with trees than people. Maybe that's because of what happened to Sarah, my twin sister, in these very woods 15 years ago. The day she disappeared still haunts me. We were supposed to meet for our usual weekend hike, but she never showed up at our spot. The search parties found nothing, not even a footprint. It was like the forest just swallowed her whole. I took this ranger job, partly hoping I'd find some clue about what happened to her. Funny how life works out sometimes. I'm pretty good at what I do now. I can tell you which mushrooms will kill you and which ones make a nice soup. I can patch up anything from a bare scratch to a broken leg, and I know exactly what to do when tourists get themselves lost in our wilderness. But nothing, not my Olympic training, not my wilderness medicine expertise, not even my years of experience, could have prepared me for what started happening when that strange fog rolled in. It began on a Tuesday morning in November 1991. The air felt different that day. You know how sometimes you can smell snow coming? This was like that, but wrong somehow. The birds had stopped singing, and in a forest as alive as ours, that's never a good sign. My radio kept crackling with static, and my compass was spinning like a drunk teenager playing Twister. That's when the first report came in about the walking trees. I remember laughing when I heard it. Walking trees. Someone had clearly been watching too many fantasy movies. But then the calls kept coming. 5 scientists from the research station up on the mountain had gone missing. Strange mushrooms were popping up overnight. Not the normal kind, but ones that seemed to glow in the dark. And the fog, that thick, unnatural fog that seemed to have a mind of its own. I didn't know it then, but that morning was the beginning of the most terrifying experience of my life. It was also the start of finally understanding what happened to Sarah. Sometimes I wish I'd called in sick that day, stayed home with my coffee and my cat. But then again, some mysteries demand to be solved, even if the truth is more horrifying than anything we could imagine. Let me tell you what really happened on Mount Baker that November, but I warn you, after hearing this story, you'll never look at a foggy forest the same way again. And those mushrooms growing in your backyard. You might want to keep a closer eye on them. It started like any normal morning at the ranger station. I was checking the weather reports when Tom, one of our junior rangers, burst through the door. His face was pale, and he was breathing hard, like he'd just run a marathon. "Kate, you need to see this," he said, hands shaking as he handed me his phone. "The research team up at Station 7, they sent this video an hour ago." The video was shaky, but I could see Dr. Chen, the lead scientist, looking worried. Behind her the fog was so thick you could barely see the trees. "We're observing some unusual phenomena," she said in the video. "The fog isn't behaving normally, and our equipment..." Then the video cut off. I tried calling their station. No answer, just static. "Get me my gear," I told Tom, "and call headquarters to let them know I'm heading up there." As I packed my backpack, I went through my mental checklist. First aid kit, extra batteries, emergency flares, satellite phone, and my trusty rifle. Something in my gut told me I'd need every single item. The drive up the mountain road was eerier than usual. The fog kept getting thicker, and my radio kept picking up strange noises. Not static exactly, but something that sounded almost like whispers. I turned it off. When I reached the parking area near Station 7, something felt off. The research team's vehicles were there, but there were no footprints in the fresh mud. No voices, no movement, just that strange thick fog, swirling around everything. I checked my compass out of habit, and my heart skipped a beat. The needle was spinning in circles, just like it had the day Sarah disappeared. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The research station was only a quarter-mile hike from the parking lot. As I walked, I noticed something strange about the mushrooms along the trail. They seemed different, bigger than they should be. And was it my imagination, or were they giving off a faint bluish glow? Then I heard it, near, a crack of a branch breaking somewhere in the fog. I spun around, rifle ready. "Hello, Dr. Chen, this is Ranger Morrison." No answer, just more whispers in the fog. When I finally reached Station 7, the door was wide open, swinging gently in the wind. Inside, it looked like everyone had just vanished. Coffee cups were still warm, laptops were still running. One chair was tipped over like someone had gotten up in a hurry. On Dr. Chen's computer, a document was open. The last line read, "They're not just in the mist, they are the mist." That's when the power went out, and I heard something moving outside. Something big, something that shouldn't exist, and somewhere in the fog, I swear I heard Sarah's voice calling my name. My hands were shaking as I reached for my flashlight. "Sarah," I called out softly, even though I knew it couldn't really be her. My sister had been gone for 15 years, but that voice, it was so familiar. The research station felt colder now, like all the warmth had been sucked out. My flashlight beam showed papers scattered everywhere, and on the wall, their monitoring equipment was showing crazy readings, temperature drops, weird air pressure, things that just didn't make sense. Then I saw the journal. It was Dr. Chen's, lying open on the floor. The last few entries made my blood run cold. Day 1, fog's getting thicker, equipment acting strange. Day 2, saw something in the mist, tall, not human. Day 3, the mushrooms are spreading, growing too fast. Day 4, they're watching us, in the trees, in the fog. Day 5, they're here. The last word was scribbled, like she'd written it in a hurry. I heard another sound outside, a weird sliding noise, like wet branches dragging across the ground. My training kicked in. Stay calm, Kate. Think. I moved to the window, keeping my back to the wall. What I saw made me forget how to breathe for a second. In the fog, there were shapes moving, tall, thin shapes that looked almost like people, but wrong. They swayed like trees in the wind, but there wasn't any wind. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. Through the static, I heard fragments of voices. "Help us," in the trees, becoming like them. I needed to get out of there, to call for backup. But as I turned to leave, My flashlight caught something small and shiny under a desk. I reached down and picked it up. My heart stopped. It was Sarah's necklace, the one she was wearing, the day she disappeared. The little silver pine tree pendant she never took off, but it was different now, covered in tiny glowing mushrooms that seemed to pulse like they had a heartbeat. The sliding sound was getting closer, and now I could smell something, like wet earth and rotting leaves, but also something else, something that reminded me of hospitals and death. I put Sarah's necklace in my pocket, gripped my rifle tighter, and faced the door. Whatever these things were, they had taken my sister. They had taken the research team, and now they were coming for me. But I wasn't going to disappear like the others. I was going to find out what was happening in my forest, even if it killed me. I just didn't know then how close I would come to finding out exactly what that felt like. I took a deep breath and stepped outside. The fog was so thick now I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My flashlight beam just bounced back at me, like trying to see through a wall of white cotton. That's when I found the first body. It was Dr. Chen, or what was left of her. She was sitting against a tree, but something was horribly wrong. Mushrooms were growing all over her, not just on her clothes but through them, through her. Her skin had a grey, papery look, like she'd been dead for months. But I knew she'd been alive just hours ago. I'd seen a lot of terrible things in my years as a ranger, but this made me sick to my stomach. I had to look away, but when I did, I saw something that made me freeze. Footprints in the mud, but not normal footprints. They were long, too long for any human, and they seemed to appear and disappear randomly, like whatever made them was walking through the air. My radio crackled again. This time through the static, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Kate, help, like Sarah, changing. The voice sounded like Dr. Chen, but Dr. Chen was dead right in front of me. I spun around as something moved in the fog. The tall shapes were closer now. In my flashlight beam I could see they were kind of see-through, like they were made of the fog itself. They had arms that were too long, fingers that looked like twisted branches. One of them reached for me. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Olympic training or not, some things you just run from. But the forest had changed. Trails I'd walked 1,000 times were different. Trees seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. And those things, those mist walkers, they were everywhere. I found myself in a clearing I'd never seen before. There was a circle of old stones in the middle, covered in strange markings that seemed to glow with the same blue light as the mushrooms. The air felt heavy here, like right before a thunderstorm. That's when I heard Sarah's voice again, clearer this time. Kate, I'm here. I've been here all along. I turned slowly. Through the fog I saw a figure that looked like my sister, but there were mushrooms growing on her too, and her eyes were glowing that same pale blue. Sarah, I whispered, what happened to you? She smiled, but it wasn't my sister's smile anymore. We can show you, she said. We can all be together again. The mist walkers were closing in around me. I could feel the fog getting thicker, trying to get inside my mouth, my nose. The mushrooms at my feet were growing, reaching for my boots. I had to make a choice, and I had to make it fast. My hand went to my pocket where I kept the emergency flares. The thing that looked like Sarah took another step closer. Even in the thick fog I could see how her skin had turned almost transparent, with glowing blue veins running through it like tiny rivers. It doesn't hurt, Kate, she said softly. They saved me when I fell. They showed me everything. The forest is alive, more alive than we ever knew. You're not my sister, I said, but my voice was shaking. Sarah would never want this. The mist walkers were so close now, I could feel their cold breath on my neck. It smelled like wet earth and decay. One of them touched my shoulder with its long branch-like fingers, and I felt a numbness spreading from where it touched me. That's when I noticed something important. The stone circle. There were small holes in the ground near each stone, and they were releasing steam. Volcanic vents. Mount Baker was still an active volcano, after all. And these things, whatever they were, they didn't like heat. I had to act fast. The numbness was spreading down my arm, and I could feel the mushrooms trying to grow on my boots. With my good hand, I grabbed 3 flares from my pocket. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." I struck all 3 flares at once and threw them in different directions. The bright red light exploded in the fog, and the heat hit like a wave. The mist walkers screamed, a sound like wind through dead trees, and pulled back. The thing that was Sarah screamed too, but this time it sounded more like my sister. "Kate, help me." For a second I saw her really hurt, trapped behind those glowing blue eyes, and I knew what I had to do. I ran to the center of the stone circle and pulled out my last flare. The volcanic vents were getting bigger, steam pouring out as the heat from the flares disturbed them. The mist walkers were trying to retreat, but they seemed stuck to the mushroom network that covered the ground. "If you're really in there, Sarah," I said, "forgive me." I struck the last flare and jammed it into the biggest vent. What happened next was like a nightmare in slow motion. The ground started shaking. Hot steam burst from all the vents at once, filling the clearing with burning mist. The mist walkers shrieked and twisted, their fog-like bodies starting to break apart in the heat. The mushrooms began to shrivel up, turning black and crumbling. As they died, I heard voices, dozens of voices, crying out in relief, like souls being set free. I recognized some of them as the missing research team. "Kate." Sarah's voice was clear now, more human. The thing that had been wearing her face was melting away, but inside it, I could see her, my real sister, like a photo coming into focus. "Thank you," she whispered, and smiled, my sister's real smile one last time before she faded away like morning mist. But I wasn't safe yet. The heat was making the ground crack open. More steam vents were appearing, and the stone circle was starting to collapse. My lungs felt like they were on fire from the hot air. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Looking down, I saw why mist mushrooms had grown up my boots and around my ankles while I'd been distracted. They were dying now, but they were taking me with them. I fell to my knees, struggling to breathe. The world was spinning. Through the chaos, I saw something rise up from the middle of the stone circle, something huge and glowing, like a giant mushroom queen. It reached for me with thousands of tiny glowing threads. "You'll join us, anyway," it whispered in my head. But then I remembered something, my knife. With shaking hands I pulled it from my belt and started cutting away at the mushrooms holding my legs. The queen thing was getting closer, its glowing threads almost touching my face. Just as I cut through the last mushroom, the ground gave one final shake. A massive burst of steam shot up from the center vent, hitting the mushroom queen directly. It made a sound I'll never forget, like 1,000 voices screaming at once. I rolled away and ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my Olympic days. Behind me the clearing collapsed in on itself, taking the stone circle and the mushroom queen with it. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. When I finally looked back, the strange fog was gone. The forest looked normal again, but I knew I wasn't normal anymore. That was 3 months ago. I'm still a ranger at Mount Baker, but everything's different now. I'm different. The official story is that a small volcanic event caused toxic gases which made everyone hallucinate. The research team's bodies were never found. They're listed as missing, presumed dead from the gas exposure. The area is now blocked off, for safety reasons, they say. But I know the truth, and I can see the changes in myself. It started with small things. I found mushrooms growing on my boots every morning, no matter how many times I cleaned them. Then I noticed I could hear the trees, not like crazy person hearing voices, but feeling what they feel. When a tree is sick or dying, I know it. When it's happy, I know that too. The doctors found strange blue patterns under my skin, like tiny glowing veins. They ran tests but couldn't explain it. Sometimes at night, these patterns glow softly, just like those mushrooms did. I keep a journal now, writing down everything I remember and everything that's still happening. Sometimes my hand shakes when I write, and tiny mushrooms sprout from the ink spots on the paper. I have to burn those pages. Last week a hiker got lost in the forest. I found him in minutes because somehow I just knew where he was. The trees told me, I think. Or maybe it was the mushrooms that grow everywhere I walk. Sarah visits me in my dreams. Not the scary glowing version, but my real sister. She tells me I did the right thing, that she's at peace now. I want to believe it's really her and not just my mind playing tricks. The forest feels different too. The stone circle is gone, buried under tons of rock, but there are still places where the fog gets thick and my compass goes crazy. I mark these spots on my map and make sure hikers stay away. Sometimes on really quiet nights, I think I can still hear them, the mist walkers. They're weaker now, hiding in the deepest parts of the forest. Waiting, growing, but they're afraid of me too. They know what I did to their queen. I should be scared, knowing what's still out there, knowing what's happening to me. But strangely I'm not. Whatever I'm becoming, I'm still me. Still Kate Morrison, just more. And I'm still here protecting my forest. Because now I know there are things in this world that need watching, things that hide in the mist, things that grow in the dark. And sometimes the only thing standing between them and everyone else is one park ranger who knows the truth. So here I sit in my ranger station, writing this down as the sun sets behind Mount Baker. The mushrooms on my desk are glowing softly, keeping me company while I work. Tomorrow I'll go out on patrol again, checking those marked spots on my map, making sure the mist walkers stay in their dark corners. I keep Sarah's necklace with me always. The little silver pine tree pendant is now wrapped in tiny luminescent mushrooms that I can't remove. But I don't want to. It reminds me of what happened, what's real, and what I'm fighting for. New rangers sometimes ask me about that November, about the volcanic incident. I just smile and tell them to stay alert, to watch the fog, and to never ignore their compass when it starts spinning. Most importantly, I tell them to report any strange mushrooms they find, especially the glowing ones. They laugh, thinking I'm joking. I let them think that. But if you're ever hiking in Mount Baker National Forest, and you see fog that moves against the wind, or mushrooms that glow blue in the dark, or trees that don't look quite right, turn around, walk away, call for Ranger Kate Morrison. I'll come find you, I'll keep you safe. It's my job now, more than ever, because the mist walkers are still out there, and sometimes late at night, when the fog rolls in thick and heavy, I hear them whispering. They're waiting, growing stronger, planning, but this time I'm ready for them. This time I'm not just watching the forest. The forest is watching with me. My name is Michael Begay, but most people around here call me Two Hawks. I've been a ranger at Canyon de Chelly for over 20 years now. At 52, I've seen things in these ancient canyons that most folks wouldn't believe. But what happened in the summer of '73, well, that's a story that still keeps me up at night. I'm Navajo Neo Dine, as we call ourselves. Before becoming a ranger, I worked as a tribal police officer, and now I'm also training to be a medicine man, though that path hasn't been easy. You see, I carry a heavy weight from my younger days when I broke some sacred tribal laws. Those mistakes, they came back to haunt me in ways I never imagined. Let me tell you about Canyon de Chelly. Picture walls of red rock rising 1,000 feet straight up into the Arizona sky, like nature's own skyscrapers. Ancient cliff dwellings peek out from the rocks like tiny doll houses, and everywhere you look, there are petroglyphs, rock drawings our ancestors left behind. Some of them show things that make visitors nervous, creatures that change shape, beings that walk between worlds. That summer was the worst drought anyone could remember. The heat was brutal, like standing next to an open oven all day long. Dust storms would come out of nowhere, turning day into night. The tourists kept coming though. They always do. But the elders were worried. They said the weather wasn't natural, that something was stirring in the forbidden canyons. I remember the morning it all started. The sun wasn't even up yet, and I was doing my usual patrol, checking on the restricted areas where we hold our ceremonies. Something felt wrong. The birds weren't singing. The air felt heavy, like just before a big storm. But what I found that morning would be just the beginning of a nightmare I never thought possible. I was walking near Spider Rock, checking the trails like I always do, when I spotted something strange in the morning light. Tourist items were scattered everywhere, backpacks, water bottles and cameras, like someone had dropped them while running. But there was no sign of the people themselves. My radio crackled. "Two Hawks, you there?" It was Jimmy from the visitor center. "We've got a problem. A group of 5 tourists never checked out last night." My stomach turned as I looked at the scattered items again. "I think I found their stuff," I said, picking up a camera that was half buried in the red dirt. But no people. That's when I noticed the animal tracks. Now, I've been tracking wildlife all my life, but these prints, they weren't right. They started as coyote tracks, then suddenly changed to bear prints, and then to something I'd never seen before, all in the same set of footprints, like the animal had been changing as it walked. The air got colder, even though the sun was rising. I heard a sound behind me, like someone walking, but when I turned, nobody was there, just my own footprints in the dust. Then I saw it. At the base of a sacred cliff wall, someone had arranged dead rabbits in a pattern that made my blood run cold. It was an ancient symbol, one we're forbidden to talk about, one that warns of skinwalkers, evil medicine men who can change their shape. I reached for my medicine pouch, the one my grandmother gave me for protection, but as I touched it, a coyote's howl echoed through the canyon. It sounded like laughter, but not quite animal, not quite human. My radio crackled again, but this time there were no words, just static, and what sounded like whispers in Navajo, tall whispers saying my name. I knew right then that my past was catching up with me. The laws I broke in my youth, the ceremonies I disrespected, something had been waiting all these years to make me pay. And those poor missing tourists, they were caught in the middle of something that started long before they ever set foot in our sacred canyon. I picked up the tourist's camera with shaking hands. Something told me to check it, even though part of me didn't want to see what was on it. Clicking through the photos, my heart nearly stopped. The first few shots were normal, happy tourists, sunset views, ancient ruins, but the last 3 photos, the first showed a dark figure standing on a cliff edge, too tall to be human, its head shaped wrong. The second photo was blurry, but I could make out what looked like a coyote standing on 2 legs, wearing what seemed like human clothing. The last photo made me drop the camera. It showed my father, who'd been dead for 15 years, standing among the tourists, smiling at the camera. Just then my phone rang. It was Sarah from the hospital in town. 2 hawks, she said, her voice trembling. "We found one of them, one of the tourists. But something's wrong, really wrong. You need to come see this." I drove to the hospital faster than I should have. The whole way there, I kept seeing things from the corner of my eye, shadows moving the wrong way, animals that disappeared when I looked directly at them. At the hospital, Sarah met me at the entrance. She looked scared. "The tourist," she whispered. "She's alive, but she keeps changing. One minute she looks normal, the next, she couldn't finish her sentence." When I walked into the room, I saw what she meant. The tourist, a woman probably in her 30s, lay on the bed. As I watched, her face seemed to shift, like ripples on water. One moment she looked like herself, the next like someone else, then like something that wasn't human at all. She opened her eyes and looked right at me. "You," she said in a voice that wasn't hers. "The one who broke the laws. They've been waiting for you." Then she started speaking in perfect Navajo, a language I knew she couldn't possibly know. She was telling an old story, one about a group of skinwalkers who were punished by the tribe hundreds of years ago. I felt the medicine pouch at my side grow hot. Outside the window, a dust storm was rolling in, much bigger than any normal storm. And in the swirling dust, I could see shapes moving. shapes that shouldn't exist. The woman grabbed my arm. "They're coming," she said, "and they're wearing your father's face." I ran out of the hospital, my mind racing. I needed help, and I knew exactly who to go to. My grandmother, the eldest medicine woman in our tribe, but when I got to her house, something wasn't right. The front door was open, swinging in the wind. Inside, all her medicine bundles were scattered across the floor. On the wall, written in red clay, was a message in Navajo: "Remember what you stole, child." My hands started shaking. 25 years ago, as a foolish young man, I had stolen sacred items from a ceremonial cave, items I was never supposed to touch. I'd put them back the next day, but some laws, once broken, can't be fixed with a simple apology. Looking for grandmother, a voice said behind me. I turned around, and there stood my father, or something, wearing his face. He looked exactly like I remembered him, down to the scar on his chin. But his eyes were all wrong. They were yellow, like a coyote's. "She's safe," the thing wearing my father's face said. "For now, but you have a debt to pay, son." The way it said son made my skin crawl. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp to be human. "We want what was taken from us. When you stole those sacred items, you opened a door. Now it's time for us to walk through it." The room got darker, even though it was middle of the day. More shapes appeared behind my father's figure, twisted versions of people and animals, all with those same yellow eyes. "The tourists were just practice," it said. "A way to get your attention. The real game is about to begin. You have until sunset to come to Spider Rock. Bring the medicine pouch your grandmother gave you." "And if I don't?" I asked, although I already knew the answer wouldn't be good. The thing wearing my father's face grinned wider. "Then we'll take everyone you love, one by one, starting with your grandmother, and we'll make you watch." It stepped closer, and I could smell wet earth and decay. "Oh, and son, don't bother calling for help. No one else can see us. To them you'll just be a crazy old ranger, talking to thin air." As quickly as they appeared, the shapes vanished, leaving me alone in my grandmother's messy house. Outside, the dust storm was getting worse, and in the distance, I heard coyotes howling. There's lots of them. I had until sunset to make a choice, but either way, I knew this nightmare was far from over. I had only a few hours until sunset. With shaking hands, I gathered what I needed from my grandmother's house: sage for protection, sacred corn pollen, and an ancient prayer bundle I hoped I'd never have to use. As I drove toward Spider Rock, the radio in my truck kept switching stations by itself, playing bits of old Navajo songs mixed with strange whispers. The temperature dropped so low I could see my breath, even though it was a hot summer day. Then my phone rang. It was my daughter, Mary. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking, "something's wrong with Tommy." Tommy was my 10-year-old grandson. "He's talking in a strange voice, saying things about your past," and his eyes looked different. My heart nearly stopped. They were going after my family already. "Listen carefully," I told her. "Take Tommy to Old Joe's house." Old Joe was another medicine man I trusted. "Draw a circle of salt around both of you and don't leave it, no matter what you see or hear." Just then, I saw something that made me slam on the brakes. In the middle of the road stood a group of coyotes, but these weren't normal coyotes. They were standing on their back legs, and they were wearing pieces of the missing tourists' clothes. As I watched, frozen, one of them started to change. Its fur melted away, its body stretched and twisted, until it looked like one of the missing tourists, but its eyes stayed yellow, like a coyote's. "Running out of time, two hawks," it said in a voice that was half human, half animal. "The sun is setting, and we're getting hungry." I gripped my steering wheel harder. The medicine pouch around my neck felt hot, like it was burning. I knew I had to get to Spider Rock, but I also knew they were herding me there, like sheep to slaughter. Through my rearview mirror, I could see more shapes following my truck, some running on 4 legs, others on 2, all of them moving too fast to be natural. The dust storm was getting worse, and in the swirling red clouds I kept seeing faces. Faces of people I knew were dead. Faces of the missing tourists, and worst of all, faces that were half human and half animal. Spider Rock was just ahead, its massive stone spires reaching up into the darkening sky like giant fingers. As I parked my truck, I could hear chanting coming from somewhere deep in the canyon, ancient forbidden words that no one was supposed to know anymore. I grabbed my supplies and stepped out into the howling wind. Whatever was waiting for me at Spider Rock, I knew one thing for sure. Either I would end this tonight, or it would end me. As I walked towards Spider Rock, the wind suddenly died. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. My flashlight beam showed the way, but something was wrong with the light. It seemed to bend around things that weren't there. Then I saw them. The missing tourists, all 4 of them, tied to the base of Spider Rock with ropes made of shadow. They were alive, but their faces kept changing, like TV channels switching back and forth. One minute they looked normal, the next they had animal features, coyote eyes, wolf teeth, crow beaks. "Welcome home, son." My father's voice came from behind me. But when I turned around, it wasn't just him anymore. There were 5 skinwalkers, each one wearing a face I knew: my father, my old teacher, 3 tribal elders, who had died years ago. "You remember what you stole?" the one wearing my father's face asked. "The sacred bundle you took from the cave." It wasn't just any bundle, it was our prison. For 100 years we were trapped in there, until your foolish young hands set us free. My grandmother's medicine pouch felt like it was on fire against my chest. The skinwalkers started circling me, moving in ways that hurt my eyes to watch. "We've waited 25 years, another one said, its voice like rocks grinding together, growing stronger. "Learning, and now we're ready to take back what's ours." I reached for my grandmother's pouch, but my father's shape raised his hand. He smiled. "First, look what we brought you." From the shadows they dragged out my grandmother. She looked tired but not scared. When she saw me, she nodded slightly. "Choose 2 hawks," the skinwalkers said together. "Give us the medicine pouch, or watch everyone you love become like us." Starting with her, my grandmother looked me in the eyes and said something in Navajo, a single word I hadn't heard since I was a child. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. But before I could move, the ground started shaking, and a deep hole opened up right in front of Spider Rock. It wasn't just any hole, it was the entrance to an ancient kiva, a sacred ceremonial chamber that hadn't been seen in hundreds of years. "Down we go," my father's shape grinned. "Time to finish this where it all began." The skinwalkers forced me down into the kiva. The air was thick with the smell of old dust and something else, something rotten. My flashlight showed ancient paintings on the walls, but they seemed to move in the beam like they were alive. "Remember this place?" my father's shape asked. "This is where you took the bundle, where you broke the seal that held us." My grandmother was beside me now, her hand finding mine in the dark. The tourists were still above ground. We could hear their confused cries. Suddenly, all 5 skinwalkers started changing at once. Their borrowed faces melted away, showing what they really were: twisted things, part human, part animal, with eyes that glowed like hot coals. They were something from our oldest stories, something that should have stayed buried in the past. Now, the thing that used to look like my father said, "Give us the medicine pouch, or watch what we do to her." It reached for my grandmother, but my grandmother squeezed my hand and started singing, an ancient prayer song, one I remembered from my childhood. The skinwalkers screamed, a sound that was half howl, half human cry. I joined in the song, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger. The medicine pouch around my neck began to glow with a soft blue light. "Stop," the skinwalkers shrieked. "You don't know what you're doing." But I did know. My grandmother's word earlier, Nif had reminded me of something I'd forgotten. The bundle I stole as a young man wasn't their prison. It was their trap. And my grandmother's pouch. It was the key to setting that trap again. The skinwalkers lunged at us, their forms shifting wildly. Coyote, crow, wolf, snake. But they couldn't get past the circle of blue light now surrounding us. Your choice, two hawks, they snarled. Your grandmother's life, or, no, I said firmly. My choice is to finish what I started 25 years ago. I pulled the medicine pouch from my neck, and my grandmother grabbed my other hand. Together, we started the final verse of the song. As we sang the last words of the ancient song, the medicine pouch burst into bright blue flames in my hands. It didn't burn, it felt ice cold. The skinwalkers howled and tried to run, but they couldn't escape the Kiva. You can't do this, they screamed, their bodies twisting between human and animal shapes faster and faster. We'll take everyone you love. My grandmother's voice grew stronger, and I saw tears in her eyes as she sang. She had known all along. She had given me that medicine pouch years ago, waiting for this moment. The blue light filled the entire Kiva. The skinwalkers' shapes began to melt like wax, pulling toward the center of the room. The one wearing my father's face looked at me one last time. Son, it whispered, sounding exactly like my real father. For a second I hesitated. Don't listen, my grandmother said sharply. That's not your father. The ground started shaking again. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling. Above us I could hear the tourists screaming. With a sound like thunder, the blue light shot up through the roof of the Kiva. The skinwalkers' bodies stretched like smoke, being pulled into my grandmother's now empty medicine pouch. Their screams echoed off the ancient walls, getting fainter and fainter until, silence. The pouch dropped to the dirt floor, now looking old and worn. My grandmother picked it up with shaking hands, and tied it with a special string covered in prayers. It's done, she said softly. But there's a price. I knew what she meant. I could feel it in my bones. The power we used to trap them. It had changed me. I could see things now that no one should see. Shadows moved differently around me. Animal eyes in the dark looked more human than they should. We climbed out of the Kiva to find the tourists unconscious but alive. They wouldn't remember anything, my grandmother said. But I would remember everything. You'll have to protect this place now, she told me. They'll be trapped as long as you live, but others like them might come. You'll see them for what they are now. That was 2 years ago. I'm still a ranger at Canyon de Chelly. The tourists still come and go, not knowing what happened here. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is dark, I hear scratching sounds coming from deep underground, and I know they're still there, waiting. Every month, I go back to that Kiva to check the seals. Every month, I say the prayers my grandmother taught me, and every month, I remember that some laws once broken can only be fixed with a lifetime of watching and waiting. Because in the end, that's the real truth about skinwalkers. They never really go away. They just wait for someone else to make the same mistakes I did.